Hey, what's going on, guys? Hope you got your seatbelts on. This is going to be a really, really interesting episode, and I'll get into it more as you'll see later in the episode. But this is a guy named Nick that I'd met on a Facebook community and struck up a conversation with him and asked him to come on the show and tell his story. But I think this was Nick's first time ever doing a podcast and coming on and telling his story. So this was through a cell phone. This was the first time recording in my new studio. So I have my soundproofing and stuff up. So the quality is not as good as you are used to from me. And for that, I apologize. But the content is definitely not lacking. But I just wanted to let you guys know about that and apologize up front. So there is some static, a little bit of echo, but just look over that and focus on the content, because the content is there. I just wanted to preface that before we get into it, but sit back, relax, and enjoy the journey, guys.
All things continually lead back to serpents, dragons, fairies, Nephilim, and fallen angels.
In the distance looms a mystical mountain.
As Mike Heiser used to say, if it's in the Bible and it's weird, it's probably important.
At its peak, a great fire burns, concealing the Prometheus lens.
This development of this knowledge that's being talked about within the mystery schools.
An ancient artifact said to reveal the hidden truth within a deliberately darkened world.
There is a hidden history that's been deliberately obfuscated from the peoples of the world.
Join us as we travel and explore the vast unknown. It's a hero's journey with dragons to slay, damsels to save, and innumerable treasures to hoard. Torches high.
The Smithsonian, they'd caught wind of a giant skeleton, would send their agents out to get it.
But it takes courage to move forward, to move out of the shadows, out of the unreality that we think of as reality.
We are all on the hero's journey.
Mankind has been in contact with and influenced by extraterrestrials.
Leave the sentient mound of bull feathers out of it.
You know, look at it from a different perspective. Different perspective.
What's happening and what is up? Hold out your glass, because we're about to fill it up. Welcome to the Prometheus Lens podcast. I'm your host, Justin. Here we like to use the allegory of the Prometheus lens, just take second looks at everything. Well, today, we're going to talk about some supernatural experiences and the darker side of things. There's people out there that's had supernatural experiences in this world, and they don't feel safe to talk about them. They're afraid that they're going to be ridiculed, made fun of, or be called, attention seekers and things like that. So when we actually have these people that are willing to step forward and talk about their experiences, we need to be there with an open ear and listen, because there's always lessons to be learned. And no one rule of war is to know thy enemy. Well, I was on a Facebook community one day, and we were talking, a big group of us, about the fallen realm and Satan and just things of this nature. And we had a few people coming up saying, Satan's not real, and it's a figment of your imagination, and these people that make this stuff up there just, making up stories for attention, and just going back and forth like that. And then I had this man that responded and said, no, I know that the dark realm is real, and I know Satan is real. And he said, I have seen the Baphomet. And immediately, this, sparked my attention. So I reached out to this gentleman and sent him a message. And I didn't hear back from him for probably maybe like a month or two. But then all of a sudden, I get a message back from him. And he's like, hey, I'd love to sit down and talk to you about this. I'm just now seeing your message. So that is why we're here today. But I'd like to introduce to the show Nick. Nick, thank you for coming forward and talking to us today.
Thank you, Justin. I really appreciate having the ability to do so.
And just like I said, in the opening there, this is not a easy subject. It's not a comfortable subject. So we definitely appreciate your bravery and your courage and your openness to come out and talk about these things.
Whatever can bring, hopefully, to somebody. Even in between the lines of the story, I strive every day to try to bring some sort of seed or understanding of, how the world works and God. At least my perspective, however skewed it is, it maybe resonates with somebody else.
Well, Nick, I guess just give us the backstory. Let us know a little bit about yourself and childhood, upbringing, and give us a feel for who Nick is.
Well, I grew up in an old Victorian house in a small town, and my grandparents were the original owners, that lived here. My mom moved in with them, so her and my older brother at the time, so my mom got remarried, so we always had a large family, and that was about 3 when that happened. So the house specifically that I've lived in, unbeknownst to me at the time, was always filled with paranormal activity. My grandpa had experiences, and then later on down the road, my stepdad would, and I did too, quite a bit as a child. Like I said, had a large family, so there was always people around. My grandparents had, grandpa's brother lived here at one time, so it was not uncommon to see a lot of people all around all the time. But the difference is like I would see people that I didn't realize they looked different the way they dressed, because they'd be dressed in like old, early 1900s, late 1800s sort of clothes. But I didn't think nothing of it. And I just see them acting out things and telling me things. It was just to me, it didn't make sense, but I wasn't spooked by it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I would, like, I remember one specific, like one really out of a number of others, like, me and my brother had bunk beds, and my mom even says, we used to talk about how we'd see our toys being played with, and the understanding was that there was a woman and a child spirit presence here that my grandfather saw and my stepdad saw. But when I was a kid, I was just laying there, and I heard the sound of my mom call my name in the middle of the night, woke up, and there was like a woman figure standing in the bedroom doorway. And I saw one of our toys. It was like this old Transformers type cap gun that would transform from a robot into a gun or something like that, a cap gun. And floating right above me with this like green hue behind it. I just laid there dumbfounded, just staring at it. And for whatever reason, I just got up and walked into the bathroom and swallowed a quarter. I mean, it's just so silly, but it's a very, vivid memory of mine. And I couldn't tell you how, maybe I was like 3 or 4 when that happened, so just a lot of weird things, not quite as weird as that, but like just stuff that I, like, in my hindsight, my memory, I'm like, what did I see? What was that stuff? You know what I mean?
And that's what's I find fascinating is when these people that have these encounters and these stories from young ages, they're all very similar. They all say, "Oh, well, I've seen this every day. I thought it was normal. I thought everybody's seen it." It's always that same kind of thing. Karen Wilkinson, she was abducted by aliens from, she said, as early as she can remember. She never told nobody. She said she thought that it just happened to everybody. She thought it was just a normal thing. And Micah Turnbow, spoke to him. He sees spirits and sees into the spiritual realm. And he said that he remembers being a kid in church and just seeing these glowing apparitions circle around his sisters while they were doing praise and worship. And he just thought that was part of the light show, that everybody's seen it. So, I mean, that's a very common thing.
Yeah, and when you're that young, you don't you don't know what's what. You know what I mean? Like, you really are of probably the most pure sense of the world, because you don't have any preconceived notions about anything. You just take it as it goes.
Well, were they always benevolent? Like, did you ever have any, like, them trying to scare you, mess with you? Like, you hear like poltergeists, throwing dishes and things like that.
No. It was always very, almost like a comfort, like almost like unassuming. And here's the interesting thing about these specific ones, because they were generational, because like I said, my grandfather had a few experiences, and my stepdad did. And the way that I did wasn't just them. It was a number of other ones. And then I think my little brother even claimed, which was strange to me at the time, because I had always felt a darker presence but never saw anything. But he claimed he had seen like a dark figure that like just felt like an evil presence. And I never got that sense, but I never doubted it either. By the time I got a little bit older and took a little bit more intrigued to these things, I just started wondering if like there wasn't some sort of, and this is way before I had any real understanding of the spiritual world, or any sort of, religious connotations, anything tied to it, because that's really where my faith starts from, is the spirituality of sorts. But the only thing that I had happen that I would say that I didn't know is I'd have these figures tell me to do like mischievous things. Like I was pretty young when my mom got remarried. My stepdad was a big toy collector. Like, he had vintage toys, and he'd buy newer toys and they'd be in the package, and I'd have someone tell me, and it sounds like what a kid would want to do anyway. Like, someone would tell me to go open those toys up, go get into them, right? I knew better. And in my own mind, I would never have done something like that. But the minute that something told me to go do it, I would just feel like it was okay to go do it, right? And so I would.
And we talk about too, like a lot of preconditioning, like especially like with Hollywood, you see all these things play out in these movies, and it's actually happening in real life. As you was telling that story, I couldn't help but think of that movie from the 80s or early 90s, Little Monsters. You remember that?
Yeah.
That's what that put me in the mind of, for those that are listening that's unfamiliar with this movie. It's got Howie in it from the, Let's Make a Deal. What is it? Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
Yeah.
And did the America's Got Talent, I think.
Yeah.
Old one.
Yeah, Howie Mandela. But he played a monster. How kids always say there's a monster under their bed. And that's what he was. And there was this whole other realm underneath the bed that would open up at night. And these monsters would come out and terrorize these kids. And then they would, do all these mischievous things to get the kids in trouble and blame the kids and talk the kids into doing these things too.
Yep. That's funny. I loved that movie as a kid. And I guess I never put those together, like, thinking about it. Like,
yeah, what did he say? He said, where there's a bed, there's a way.
Yep. That's funny, man. I never thought about that.
Well, you had mentioned, that your faith journey kind of started off, like in spirituality. Would you care to go into that? So I'm assuming by that, you wasn't raised like in a Christian home, I guess.
No, not necessarily. Actually, that was nothing as far as that's concerned. We didn't have any. My dad, who I didn't really talk to for like the first 13, 14 years of my life, I guess he grew up Catholic, but it's never been an imposed thing or anything. You know what I mean? So, like, I am the epitome of a latchkey kid. I don't know. Some people know what that is. It's, I went to school on my own in the morning because my mom worked first shift, and I took myself to school from kindergarten. You know, if we didn't go to a babysitter sometimes, but me and my older brother, we came home on our own. You know, unlocked the door, the key was out under the mat or whatever, and we got ourselves off to school as well. So we had a pretty, I wouldn't say liberal, because whatever that word means today isn't the same as what I mean. But we were pretty unchecked for a lot of ways.
It was a different time, you know. It was like that even when I was growing up. You know, what they call it now, free range parenting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, not that
just working class people, you know.
Yeah, and I get it. You know, I'm 40 now with 3 kids, man. You're tired, and it's really to let things just overseen, and you know, you don't know sometimes. Like, it's just life, unfortunately, in that aspect.
Yeah. Well, so when you mentioned spirituality, the thing that popped in my mind was kind of like, you know, maybe like, you know, some new age type stuff. Is that what you were referring to, or?
No, so those happenings, right? I was just talking about this with one of my good friends who is probably a rare one that like is on very few people that I find is deeply biblically understanding, that I can talk to a lot of it. And I was talking about that earlier, you know, in preparation of like doing this with you. And I was like, I don't know where the notion of like what demons were ever got introduced, but my grandpa's uncle, who was a pastor, just so happenedly, when I would talk about some of these things, at some point I started referring to it that demons were the ones doing this. And I remember all the other, and even my grandpa himself, like the way that they would kind of like almost like play into the conversation, like as if though, you know, they're just catering to a kid's, you know, rantings or whatever. Like, yeah, that happens, Nick, you know, like as if though it's normal. And I remember him being the one that kind of was the one that told me about such things. And I think he saw way more than, and I'll get to him because he was the one, you know, when I was 13 that did my baptism for me. So like spirituality to me was like at whatever point of conscious understanding that there was another world of sort when it came to, you know, this world that existed. But what I kind of like didn't understand was like how some people were so accepting that they believed in such things, but yet I felt like that they weren't being as genuine in like their own intrigue about it, right? Because like my grandfather himself, like he had these experiences, but like I couldn't really ever talk to him on a level where I felt like he was hearing me, you know, and like how real this was. It was almost like it was like folklore feeling, right? So yeah, in spirituality, it's always been my inability to coincide like what the actual physical world and then this world of intuition and feeling, and then, you know, once you become conscious of such things, you really start battling with that a little bit, I think. And I know I did, you know, very early on, because it was just like, well, they became less apparent as visuals, right? So it's not like I'm seeing these things. Once, it really seems like once I had some sort of title to give them, I don't remember ever having like outright visuals until later on. And then, of course, that has to hit, you know, in a really bad point of adolescence when you're, you know, like me, I was a little troubled when it came to, you know, not being a good kid, but like I saw certain things at times, and yeah, you don't know if it's the drugs talking or what. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and he's talking about the Christians too. I mean, and I've talked about this a lot. It's I use L.A. Marzulli's phrase a lot because he articulates it really well. You know, he says that, you know, the modern day church has a very truncated view of the supernatural. You know, they believe, you know, that Jesus was conceived and born of a virgin, that he died and resurrected after 3 days, and that he ascended to heaven, and angels ascending and descending and walking through walls and breaking chains of prisoners and setting them free, and just all these supernatural things in their Bible that they say they believe and profess in. But when you start having conversations like we're having right now, know that they're seeking attention. Oh, they're liars, or they're on drugs, or you know what I mean? It's just like with them, it's the buck stops at Jesus. It's either they proclaim they believe these things and really don't, or they think that God just doesn't operate like that no more, or after the cross, the power switch got turned off.
Yeah, no, I know for 100% certainty that that's not the case. And what I've come to kind of figure out a little bit is that, there's aspects of faith that are just, not even really that easy to really realize where you're challenged with them, and how that ultimately reflects back to your faith unto God. And he's trying to present those as kind of like, almost illuminated things that point us to the narrow path. I always talk about that, like we're like repeated themes in someone's life when it comes to like, especially like, love relationships and how we conduct ourselves in that, how society imposes it, etc. Like, how do I always end up with this type of person, blah, blah, blah. Like, yeah, it's probably, God trying to get you to see an aspect of how you love,
Yeah, I always see it as testing grounds. It's like you keep making the same mistakes, so you keep getting the same test over and over again.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly like, pretty much what it is. And there's all sorts of aspects. And when it comes to faith, that's one of the ones that I'm so sorry to have figured out so long into my life, given that I've had all these things. That's why, I've been accused of being a smart person, and I don't feel that way. I feel like I've just had to learn hard way one too many times,
No, I totally get it. Guilty as charged. Well, walk us through, so you had these experiences as a kid, and you mentioned that, you were baptized at 13.
And I didn't really take to Christianity per se at that point, but I will say, like, I became a very conscious person, like, as far as, like, just being more aware, self-aware. My self-awareness really, really started at that point. And, before I get far from it, my uncle that baptized me, he, like I said, he was the only one that kind of seemed to take seriously these things that I said as a kid, a little kid. He leaned into me when he got done, with the baptism, took his hand off my head. He leaned in and he said, this is more important than you realize, or something like that. Like, where I never thought about that again until the night of my salvation in 2019. Like, that's what I call my real salvation. I finally came to it because, I'm sorry to say that, like, at the time when I was a teenager through my early adulthood up until then, I never was ready to accept a biblical God, because as I always knew there was something wrong in the world. There was something wrong with some of the big themes, like money and just the things that, like, are really important to people, like having, a job, as far as, like, the means of why you had a job. Like, it really bothered me. And I kind of always, at the time, it was like, well, is that just because I want to be, not a loser, but, like, I'm an aspiring musician. So, like, is this my excuse to not, do such things or whatever? Because I was always going against the grain in that sense. And well, I can say now at 40, I own a house and I work a solid job. I do all those things, and I don't feel the least bit gratified by it in that sense. Like, to where I was imposed on to like take it as, you know what I mean? I feel pretty validated in some of those things, and to come to the, realization of what money is, and how it's manipulated, and just in that whole sense, like, yeah, I feel pretty validated. Like, even having those almost apprehensions as a younger person, like, I carry very much the spirit of that youth sense, right? Not to get too far up, like I said, my uncle, he says this would mean more to you. And I guess I would watch a lot of the History Channel, right? Especially back in the early 2000s. And anybody that did, all you ever saw was these cosmos, like, the universe. That's, I think, that program on there. So, like,
I'm not saying it's aliens, but it's aliens.
Right. And especially like Big Bang. So, like, I was always at odds with, accepting that as like this truth, right? And nobody talked about flat Earth back then. No, you didn't hear about stuff like that. And I wasn't opposed to a biblical God. I really felt like, well, if this is such an in-your-face kind of mainstream type thing, then I take it with apprehension. I'd even say that, even at the moments like where I'd find a biblical passage where I'd be like, wow, that really hits the nail right on the head. And I'd straight up like look up to the sky and I'd be like, I still don't know if it's you or not, Like, just always things like that happening over, 20 some odd years.
And if you look at the biblical narrative, a lot of people will, talk badly about you, but, look at, doubting Thomas, look at Gideon. There was plenty of people in the Bible that God used and did great things in service of the Lord that were doubters and had questions and asked for signs and things like that. That's just a natural human reaction.
Well, yeah. And, I didn't know a lot of those things, and I was pretty oblivious to a good amount of it. And, it all happens in its own time, obviously, but I'm really grateful that I finally it came to in the circumstances of whatnot. And I'm glad that I brought up that job aspect part of it, because it really wasn't until, I didn't have a planned parent, thing. Like, I lived a pretty promiscuous life. I did drugs freely. Like, I got really bad into opiates. I was a heroin addict, in my early mid-20s. And I even had a weird moment and all that where whatever was out there is what I would say, like, whatever's out there. I had this like weird fascination with like learning about the dark side. And I'm not even like a Star Wars fan, but like, I guess if you had to put it in the sense of comparative, like there was a darker aspect of human nature that I was more fascinated with, I guess. And not that I wanted to be a bad person. I just wanted to understand something, like what made people tick in the ways that it did. Because I guess the first and foremost, I've always been really like just intrigued by human nature, more or less, for better or worse.
Guys, what's up? Tom Dunn here from Through the Black. We have launched our new ministry outreach, No More Dead Babies. And the website is nomoredeadbabies.com. We want you to go to that website and get a free t-shirt, okay? And we want you to join the movement, okay? We need soldiers to step up and say that they're going to be a voice for the voiceless, okay? Guys, we've never done anything like this before. This is a big deal, and I don't know who all is ready for it out there, but it's time to step up, okay? And we're asking you to go to the website and order the shirt. The shirt is free, but you got to pay for shipping, okay? We're going to ship it out to you as soon as we get it. You tell us what size you need, and then we're going to send you the t-shirt, okay? Join us. The goal is to get thousands of these shirts out. Keep pushing this. I think this boldness can be contagious, contagious, contagious.
My name's Nick. I'm the owner of Kevlar Joe's, and I'm the roaster. I'm an Air Force Security Forces veteran, a dad to 3 wild boys, and a husband to my wife, Crystal, and a coffee enthusiast. From a family in a small town in Missouri, we started with the simple idea of crafting a perfectly bold cup of coffee. Inspired by wellness and countless pots of stale coffee while deployed, we wanted to craft a bold, clean, and smooth coffee. So we did. And we realized we wanted to share this coffee with our friends. Lord knows we could all use a good cup of coffee right about now. From the farm to your coffee cup, there's nothing like a good, well-crafted, and bold cup of coffee. No matter what time of the day, it's there to pick you up, motivate you, and relax you. We hope you enjoy our coffee. Be bold, be humble, be Kevlar. And you can find Kevlar Joe's Coffee Company anytime you want at www.kevlarjoe.com. Enjoy.
Well, I know you mentioned that you were a musician. So, with, the music industry, there's a pretty good, stereotype out there. They say it's, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, and you mentioned the drugs, that you used to be pretty bad off on, heroin and opioids and stuff like that. I'm of the opinion, because I was once there myself, that these drugs and things like that are like veil weakeners, if that makes sense. Like it weakens the veil so these entities can appear to you, speak to you, and basically, Vicky Joe Anderson talks about this a lot. She refers to it as like a back door to the supernatural realm. So did I know you said that as you got older, they didn't appear as much, but you could feel a presence. Did the use of the drugs enhance your experiences with these entities?
Not in like the most obvious way. It's definitely more of a, kind of behind the scenes thing and provocations. And I will say, to outright seeing demonic entities, there's only been 2 times that I can actually really attribute knowing what it was. Not exactly this one that I'm going to speak of. So very early on, when I first few times I ever went through really bad dope sickness, I'll never forget it. It was, going to bed at night, and I'd been sleeping all day already, but I wanted to check out. And my routine at the time was I always had my TV on, and I decided to sleep in my armchair for whatever reason. I covered the, and it was already nighttime, but so no light come into the room. And I covered everything up pitch black in there, and I turned the TV off, and I tried to go back to sleep and tried to stay asleep for the night. Well, at some point I did fall asleep, but I became consciously aware when I woke up. And this is where it was weird for me. So when I woke up, I'm thinking in my head, shit, I don't want to, I'm alive, I'm remembering I feel like crap, I'm sick. And then I'm kind of I actually asked myself this question in my consciousness. I said, am I actually awake? Am I still asleep? And like I said, it's pitch black in the room and my eyes are closed if I'm sleeping. But as soon as this question crosses in my mind, this flash of the most, I can't even find an earthly image of a demonic face. And I've tried, trust me, I've tried to find any image that matches what this thing was, flashed in front of my face. And it sent me across the room just completely freaked out. I was scattered trying to get across the room to the light switch, turn a light on. Startled me so bad. And to this day, I don't know, if that happened while I was still in some form of sleep coming out of it, or if I actually opened my eyes. Just because of this one little circumstance, And then there was another pretty heavy moment in there. I was going through dope sickness, and I went through some pretty extreme troubles just to get a hold of one little pill that was going to probably help me for a couple hours. And my syringes were pretty old and used up. I only had one, and it would like barely work. So like, you know, syringes, when they get really old, they don't plunge, they don't, you know, suck up anything. And it took me like 2 or 3 hours of just completely trying to get this pill into this syringe, and I was not going to take it any other way. Well, so after a few hours of struggling with it, I finally get it in there, and I go to stand up, and I go to walk out of the little room where I was sitting in that I did it in. And all of a sudden, my legs give out on me, and I just land on my face practically. And I'm just sitting there staring, like, and I feel this like presence imposing down on me, just lecturing me, and I can't move. And I think the clock said like it was like 1 a.m. at that point. And whatever was holding me down there, when I finally came to and I got up, and all of a sudden I'm sick again, and it's like 4 o'clock in the morning at that point. And I was just completely like, what just happened? You know what I mean? Like I think it was God trying to wake me up, because around that time was when my son was going to be born. And I was trying to get actively clean, but I kept backsliding and doing all these stupid things. You know, found myself in jail. And, you know, I felt this really big presence of like, just trying to be woke up to like, you need to get it together. Like, for obvious reasons in that sense. And, you know, I did ultimately. It didn't take me too much longer after that. It was a little back and forth, but somewhere where I'm not even close to now. I've been, you know, sober from that for 14 years now, at least 15 years.
And that's awesome, man. And I know you probably heard it from everybody around you, but you know, you ain't heard it from me. But I'm proud of you, man. I was down that dark hole, and you know, I never resorted to needles, but I done everything else. And you talking about the sickness and all these things. A lot of people can hear that and sympathize, but if you've not been there, you don't know. You do not know. You cannot begin to know the sickness and just how bad you feel detoxing off of this stuff. And it's easy for people to sit back and be like, oh, well, they're a loser. They're never going to get their life straightened out. You know, it's tough, man. It's tough.
It's funny too, because there's people that are so apathetic that will, you know, I don't go to the point of calling it like it's referred to as a disease. I think it's something much worse than that, you know, like it really is a suffering of spiritual death. And to understand the gravity of that, lack of a better word, that's just a completely overlooked thing. It really is, because when I came to like, you know, understanding things that Jesus talks about, and especially like what he spoke of, you know, his first coming as, you know, helping with spiritual death. And that's become very significant to me, because it's very rampant, you know. It was then, and even more so now, right? So yeah, disease is just another manufactured word as far as I'm concerned, but there are people that would refer to it as, you know, a disease, and then the people that are apathetic to it as a disease. Like, it's just, there's no real understanding of it, completely overlooked.
And your story too about being in the chair, that reminds me of, I talked to this guy named Brady, and I talked to him about, well, initially it was because he was a 3rd degree Mason, and he was talking about, you know, his experiences with the Masons and the Masonic Lodge. But, you know, he had a similar story, you know, that he was, you know, getting on drugs and alcohol and things like that. And he said that he was basically living like in a basement apartment. And he talked about some of these supernatural experiences he had, and his was very similar to yours. He was laying back in his recliner, and he said that basically just out of nowhere, just this apparition, this demonic, just terrifying face or apparition appears right in front of him, nose to nose, and screams at him. And he said, I flipped out of my chair. But he had some really wild experiences. He seen wolves in the woods that laughed at him, like he said it sounded like a little girl.
Wow.
And run up underneath his hammock. He had a hammock pitched up between two trees. And it's
and
similarities of these stories.
When you're telling people about those things, it's unfortunate because you have the connotation of drugs being involved. So like people are just like, well, of course those have to be involved, which let me just say, the Baphomet story did not involve any drugs. Cause like I said, I've been clean as far as that goes, for, a lot longer going back. So yeah, I wasn't on any drugs whatsoever when it came to the Baphomet situation that would present itself down the road.
So, since you opened that door, let's go there. Now, with the Baphomet, you said, how long were you clean for when you had this experience?
Probably about 10 years.
Okay, so this was within 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, 2019 was. So when I talked about having a job and whatnot, like, so I have 3 beautiful kids now, and going back 10 years, they were pretty young, and then my third one wasn't even born yet. But like, at some point, I finally was like, wanted to find better jobs, wanted to find a better job, one that would provide a better life for us. So I pursued at the time, Frito-Lay was a really great job. So I was working for Frito-Lay and just battled over the years that I was doing it, making great money and able to bring this providing, but like I didn't have a sense of happiness. And I'd always confront myself with that, like, am I happy? I think I am. But I wasn't. But I wasn't, like, I don't know what I was, right? Like, I had this, like, weird limbo in that time. So, the relevancy of that is, like I said earlier, about the whole job thing, money, all these things, like, that I'd always had kind of like this, it's almost like something's not right. Well, that all comes to a head at the beginning of 2019 because I'm doing really well for myself. I'd just gotten a promotion, like 3-4 months before February of 2019, and I went on vacation and I found out that I was demoted for some really ridiculous reasons. Won't go into all of it, but pretty much I took a big hit and reduced, and everything I'd been working hard for was all gone over some psychopath that held a grudge against me or something. Like I said, it was pretty devastating nonetheless. I hit a pretty big, just like, why is this happening to me? Like, I've done nothing but work really hard, And that's not me, like, a woe is me. Like, I really did. Like, everybody involved thought it was wrong. But anyway.
Well, that's the thing with a man. You attack his work and his money because we are money-minded and we are programmed, to work and provide for our families. So a lot of men struggle with that because I make jokes with people all the time and tell people I'm a mercenary. I've done lots of different types of work. I've worked with steel, I've worked in plastics, and all kinds of different things. And I'd done some CNC work for a few years, and I actually had a guy that seen my resume on Indeed a few years ago reach out to me and was trying to get me to work for his company. And I was like, well, I don't know. And I'll never forget it. He asked me, he's like, well, do you want to be a CNC machinist? Because this is the place for you, and all this stuff. And I was like, man, if you look at my resume, I've dabbled in everything. I was like, it ain't that I want to be a machinist. I said, I'm a mercenary. Yes, you pay me more money than I'm making now, I'll probably go there. It ain't about happiness, it's about money.
Yeah, I can honestly say like that wasn't just it for me. I don't have any special skills. Like, I mean, yeah, I've been working since I was 14 on and off, but like I had long periods without jobs. And like I didn't have any hope of making, you know, a lot of money other than working class, like, you know, barely maybe making it over the poverty line. So the options, especially where I geographically live, there's not, unless you're like in a specialty of sorts or have a degree or whatever, like that possibility's been bleak. But you know, this just so happened to provide me with the ability that it got me to a level that I you know, a few years prior couldn't have imagined, you know, especially working 3 times as hard. And it's still never, like, it was just too easy to me, right? Like, I'm not one that takes pride, like I have nice things and I've worked for them. Like I bought a brand new car out of it. Like, I don't covet them. And not that I don't take care of them either, but like some people take that a little too seriously to some degree. Not that you shouldn't take pride in such things to a degree, but like to the level I've seen some people react, like I'm not that type of person. So, you know,
there's a balance to everything.
But in this instance, like, so I really did have a very focused drive, right? Because my wife, she didn't see it that way. Like I was, you know, not very present and being as much involved in family things. I was working a lot and I was like, you know, sleeping. I had really weird work days. I didn't have consistent scheduling with hers. Like she was pretty traditional, Monday, Friday, weekends off. I worked weekends. I'd split days off. Like it just, there was no consistency, but like in my mind, I'm just doing what I think I should be doing. Well, we had bought a new house in 2016. We had bought, well, actually, the funny thing is we bought my childhood home and we had traded houses with my parents, you know, because they wanted to downsize.
Now, hold up, say, now, you bought the house that you grew up in that you had all these supernatural experiences in?
Yep.
Yep,
exactly.
Now it's getting interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, that was in 2016. And like I said, it's an old Victorian house. It's not like super expensive or like rich. I mean, yeah, there was a higher class of people that obviously owned this house, you know, in 100 some odd years prior. But like the way the town developed it, I don't live on a richer side of town. Like that's exactly south of here. But there were high-end people that lived here at the time, so it has that appeal or look to it to some people. But yeah, but it's still, nonetheless, it's a costly old house, you know? There's just stuff that goes into it. So that was really my paranoia of, you know, needing to make money at it. So I wasn't wasn't the best. I wouldn't say a terrible father, but I just, you know, you get consumed by work. You're not going to the family events. You're tired to do this. You're tired to do that. And it adds up, man. And when I got the demotion, like it was just, it gut checked me so bad that like I found myself in this terrible depression. And my marriage was already suffering prior to that, you know, my wife's telling me how she was, you know, she kind of like a year prior to that, she was talking about wanting divorce and all this other stuff. And like, I couldn't hear her and her complaints because I thought I was justified in how I was going about things at the time. And maybe it was a little bit of both, I don't know, whatever, right? But anyway, so what is February till June, right? I'm limping along, I'm going to work, and like I said, me and my wife became kind of estranged. And one night in the middle of the night, in June, early June, a voice woke me up out of bed. Mind you, she works second shift. So like, she'd come home about 11 o'clock at night. And sometimes I'd be up, sometimes not. Well, this night I was sleeping. It's about 2 o'clock in the morning, 2:30 in the morning. And a voice wakes me up. And I get up and it said, go see. And when I first heard it, I just woke up and I was just like, didn't know what I was hearing. I didn't know if I heard something.
Go see?
Yeah, it says go see.
Okay.
And, at first I didn't know if that was something like a dream or whatever that I had heard. So I'm like half groggy, half tired, and I get up and I go to the bathroom. And as I'm getting ready to go back to lay down, now I hear the voice again. Only this time I'm a lot more awake and more aware. And I'm like, go see what? Like I'm really like half in between, like, what are we talking about? And like, I just need to go back to sleep.
What am I going to see here?
Well, before this, I guess I skipped a little part. In between those months, like I said, my depression was just so bad. I really got to a point of, like, I considered suicide. And that was something that always plagued me as a depressed person, Like, I was obviously, suicidal tendencies over my life were always constant, in and out. And at this time, the thoughts had introduced themselves into me, and almost in a way where I knew I could actually pull it off, like I would actually do it. That was the scary part about it at the time, was I knew exactly what I would do and how I would do it, and I was actually like, I think I can do this. But I was working the one day, and I had sat there pleading to whatever's out there in the universe. I need something to save me, to help me. Like, I didn't pray to God. I just said, whatever is out there, I need help. And it's just funny and how that would come about, because like this voice wakes me up in the middle of the night. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm not. So instead of going back to sleep, I decide I'm going to start walking downstairs and see my wife sitting out on the porch with our daughter. And as I'm getting ready to walk out the door, I get a.
Now, Nick, I may interrupt you, but I'm just curious. Do you remember the voice, like the tone of the voice? Was it like, a kid's voice, a woman's voice, a man's voice? Do you recall?
Yeah, it was. Man, it was not a high pitched. It was a very soft, almost like you could hear it as a younger man's voice, like higher pitched, but also could be misunderstood as a woman's voice. And it's funny because, my oldest son, he's 16 now. And sometimes his voice matches, like, I can't tell if it's his mom sometimes, because, like, he's right in that register. So it kind of has, like, that sort of softness to it. But, yeah.
Well, even the Baphomet, I mean, if you know the imagery, it's male and female. So
right,
that's interesting.
Right. Well, that wasn't the experience. So as I'm getting ready to walk out the door, I get like, I get an instant like stop, right? And it tells me to go see again. I see, but I'm like, well, I go see what? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to go see, and I'm stopped at the door here, and instead I get kind of this feeling to go over to this window. I got these big French windows that look right out into my porch side. And my wife's sitting there on her cell phone. And I just open up the curtain, and she's on her phone, playing around on it. And I start trying to focus in on what she's doing on the phone. Well, what I come upon is her in a text with an affair partner. Right? So, of course, that sparks me. And I blow up, and, what anybody can imagine kind of happens, confront, like, screaming, yelling, all this other stuff.
Right.
And I'm just destroyed, And the worst part is I got to go to work within the next couple hours. And, I never go back to sleep. I go to work. And, at some point, as I'm coping with this and then talking to her, I come back to the, wait a second. what was that voice, right? Like, finally it reoccurs to me.
Like it was telling you to go see what was transpiring.
Yeah, right. And like that really got my attention, kind of diverted. Like I almost forgot for a little bit what I was hurting about, like all these terrible things going down. And I don't know exactly what. I just knew something was good, right? And it was very weird because I had a really bad medical problem happen to me at that point. Like I doubled over in pain, my stomach, and all these things, kind of going sideways for me. But in the midst of it, I get this really big euphoria. I think I'm losing my mind, man. And I'm just overjoyed in ways that I don't understand, but yet I start having all these like, crazy things. Like I'm able to say things to my wife that like makes it sound like, like we can figure this out, right? Whatever. I mean, that's kind of a long story in that, but so like immediately in the summer following, this is June, so over the summer, like I'm hearing this voice tell me that I've got to leave my job. And I think I'm going crazy at this point. Like, I don't know what, like, if I should do this, but like, and then it would say, he will provide. And it's almost like Field of Dreams stuff. Like, I'm really wondering, like I said, if I'm going crazy. And then finally I get to the point where I'm just like, you know what?
The last time you listened, it worked out.
Yeah, screw it. So about August, I get to the point where I'm just kind of like, well, how do I go about doing this? Like, so I ended up getting myself fired just by calling off of work and ultimately getting unemployment, which was a pretty decent amount of money to be able to pay my bills, given that it was based off of my income.
Yeah, especially back during COVID,
Well, I didn't get the benefits of that. This is pre-COVID. So it was the end of 2019. So from, whatever it was, August, September, the end of 2019. So I go unemployed. And my wife, pretty much says, just take it easy. And that's where I was at. Like, we'll worry about the job situation. If something comes up, take it, whatever. But so in this time frame that I'm sitting around, I was working on a music project that I was like really stuck at, like not very, it was a really great project and probably some of the best stuff I ever felt like I was doing at the time. And yet I still lacked this creative force that like it really required. And I thought that was kind of what I was being gifted, was the ability to focus on that. And it's like every time I would go to try to work on it, it would just be a dead end. And it was very frustrating because I got all this time on my hands, and I was like in early 2009 was kind of like when my shell, quote unquote, got cracked, because my brother introduced me to like Alex Jones, the New World Order stuff, yada yada. And I definitely did a lot of research at that time on it. But like I kind of like, it's not that I didn't pay attention to world events over those years. I could tell what was going on, but like I started getting into that again. So I'm like looking into like, old things like the whole conspiracy stuff, like and doing this for a few months, I'm finding things that I didn't find back then. Like I'm almost to the point where I'm annoying myself because I'm like, oh, here we go. Nick's blaming the world for his problems, right? Like I really started wondering if like, I don't know why I'm compelled to do all this. Well, at some point about November, December is when I start finding these like avenues and intrigues pointing to more biblical natured things, right? And I don't have nearly that much biblical understanding. So like I find myself asking my sister-in-law, who is, a lifelong Christian, like, biblical questions, and like people that I think would have, knowings, like as I'm trying to, and somewhat they did, somewhat they didn't give me satisfying answers. So I finally, about the end of December, January, I get my own Bible so I can just take it upon myself And so I do that. And the one night, as you know, I'm going down this, I have this question in my head that comes up, and I ask this question. I say, why do Jews hate the Christians that love Jews? Like, I noticed this, like, and for some reason, to me, it's like a duh thing. Like, and obviously there's been, like, you know, jokes about like Christian evangelists and, you know, stuff like that when it comes to the you know, this unwavering support for Israel that isn't within some factions of the church. But as soon as I ask this question, it's like a lightning bolt strikes me in the head. Like, it's insane. Like, I guess the only way, like, if you look up the definition of being born again, like, I guess it goes along with that. Like, I felt this huge presence coming down on me and starts just showing me all these things. Like, I hear war drums. Like, I sense this, like, coming apocalyptic sort of thing. And, like, I'm being shown all these things through means of, like, technology that I'm not quite understanding, like, to what level, like the internet and all these things, and how our information, like, it's crazy. I'm still unpacking it to this day, like, what was coming down on me and all the images that were in it. But in the midst of all this, I knew exactly who it was. And in the middle of all of it, I had to drop and surrender. I dropped and I surrendered myself to Jesus Christ. Like, I knew who it was. I knew what it was without any hesitation. And that's when I gave into whatever this thing was happening to me. And it was like having a download in my brain. And it was a manic of sorts feeling. Like, it was intense.
I bet you this is when your spiritual warfare really ramped up.
Oh, tenfold, man.
And everybody's like, oh, you give your life over to God and to Jesus, everything's going to be great now, you know? No. You threw up the battle flag for the enemy team to the demonic realm, so now they're going to come after you.
Oh, man. And there's a whole nother story in the last year about all that I'm not going to get into tonight, but yeah, so I you know, as it kind of settles down, I'm just like, Lord, if these things be true, can I have a worldly sign? You know? And that night I go to bed and I wasn't thinking about that or anything. Like, I had this really great calming peace over me, but, like, I'm pretty absent-minded, actually. Like, thinking back on it, like, I wasn't expecting anything. And as soon as my head hit the pillow, and I had dabbled in astral projection when I was younger too, like in those formative years, so to say, because I did it by mistake and I learned what it was. But, like, I wasn't trying to astral project, but it felt like I was being pulled into an astral projection. The second my head hit the pillow, and I almost, like, jolted me at first, the feeling of it, because I was like, whoa, what was that? Like, that was crazy and pretty instant for when I was, like, you know, I wasn't even that tired yet. But I ended up just going right back to laying my head down and into this astral projection of just staying very close to my body all night. And I kept waking up. And it was like I was just right above myself. So 3 times throughout the night, I would wake up and roll over. My bed was right next to the bedroom door. And when I'd roll over, I'd be looking right at that bedroom door area next to me. And it was like I was looking for something to be there. But I'd roll over, nothing be there first time. Did it the second time later throughout the night. And on the third time at like 4:53 in the morning, when I looked at the clock afterwards, but the third time is when I rolled over and this entity standing over top of me, real quick like, and just, I rolled over and it's there, and it says to me, not if it's one more than 27. And more like it says, not if it's one more than 27, like this, and it lunges down at me. And I screamed, like probably a few octaves more than I'm probably supposed to be able to physically.
Now, you said that, you were almost like astral projecting here. So, like, was you seeing yourself in bed and, like, watching this?
No.
Or was you, like, back in your body?
No, and that's the thing that it's just like when I talked about it earlier, the face that I saw, were my eyes open or not? Like, it's kind of one of those ordeals because of the way that it goes. Completely absent-minded of any sort of existence, so to say. I don't know how to explain it. Like, especially given what I had just experienced earlier that night, what I've experienced over the last 6 months, the last year, whatever, my whole life, essentially. Like, there's nothing there consciously that's promoting this or, enabling this to be a figment. You know what I mean? Like,
and could you make this figure out, or was it just like the dark shadow figure?
No, I had 100% sight of it. So, like, the first thing that I noticed on it was its razor sharp teeth. And big eyes. Like, well, they weren't big eyes, but they were, and it had a yellowish, like almost like a hologram hue to it, like yellowish, like if you looked at holograms, or like, and then kind of like a mixture of like oil and water on like a pavement. You know how that rainbow looked? Kind of like glistened over. And then the sound of like metal jangling a little bit and the sound of things. Like I said, it's pretty instant, but like I was struggling with the identifying like horns and ears. Like, I was like, I'm pretty sure what I saw was horns and ears, but like which one was which was kind of as quick as it was. And that's, in hindsight especially, that's what makes me like, how much of that was really what I saw, because I don't know, like when you have like dreams, or when you have imagination imageries in your head, and then the things that you actually see, this thing registered in my brain, my memory, as something that I physically saw because of how I was recalling it. You know what I mean? Like as if though you got a quick glimpse of something, you had to recall by what your eyes physically see. So that's what I was kind of going off of.
But even if it's something quick like that, I mean, something that shocking kind of stamps your memory.
Oh, definitely. Like, hands down. Like, it's only residing right next to the craziest of the salvation moment that I experienced earlier in that night. That's on a pile of a lot of crazy stuff, man. That, what I've told and what I've probably not told either, be too much. And so I go to my internet right away, and I just start looking up, the meanings of the number 27 or 28, because one more than 27, 28, right? What they are biblically, what they are in demonology. It wasn't lost on me that this thing could have been the Baphomet, right?
It definitely wasn't a benevolent spirit.
No. And so I don't get any solid answers, but I did find in some kind of one of the first things that I found, like, so what was it, 27 significantly, and whether this is true or not was, which I'd like to think it is, because of what I experienced earlier that night with my salvation, was that 27 was a significance to the ministry of salvation, which I thought was pretty cool, right? Because I kind of come off from that experience about, the journey since then, especially, but what I had to go on prior as, the tools of being able to help preach the gospel, to help others interpret it in ways that, unfortunately, this world has altered people's abilities to finding salvation. There's no greater words that are spoken in that book and through the words of Christ himself, but like getting that to translate to people's, in the ways that sometimes can. You know, there's tons of mediums that can help unlock that to some people's perceptions. So like, I took that as like, you know, ministry of salvation is kind of like a badge. Like, so whatever that is to this message from the Baphomet, like I find that to be in, you know, relation, not if it's one more than 27. So what's 28 mean in the occult? I don't know. And so, you know, I have a few unanswered questions, and we'll fast forward over a year and a half or so. But I ended up, so like I start doing biblical research. Like I am reading Bible. Like I'm getting really well caught up in all these things. And in life, I go to a new job, and I meet this friend of mine, not too different from how we've met, you know, on Facebook on a group. And this guy's now become like one of my good friends who I talk to a lot about this stuff with, and we do a lot of iron sharpening together. And I tell him that story, and about 4 or 5 months after we start first talking, and you'll have the pictures to show for this. So coming around September of 2021, you know, we're talking, and like I start getting this like really like heavy feeling of like something's gonna happen, something's happening. And I kept telling him, man, like, I don't know why I cannot get it out of my head. Like, I think that thing that I saw was the Baphomet. And it was a Friday, and the next morning, me and my wife were going to go out for the day. We was going to go to the mall over in another town and whatnot. And as I'm getting ready to, you know, to go out, I was in the shower. And as I'm standing there in the shower, all of a sudden I get my vision taken out, and there's this being of light being, like a man or an entity that's just light, nothing but pure light. And it grabs my arm, and it says, there's going to be a big revealing coming soon. And I snap out of it. I'm like floored by this, right? Like, it's, whoa.
Yeah.
And I immediately go to my phone, you know, after I get out of the shower, and I text my friend. I said, dude, this just happened. Like, you know, like, I don't know what it is. And, you know, me and my wife go out, and it's another instance of like, I'm not having any sort of preconcept. I'm not like looking out of the corner of my eye. I'm not even thinking about it, strangely enough. That's the weird thing of how when these things happen, something like that happens, like,
usually puts you on
another, yeah, and I've got another supernatural, like I've got a number of supernatural ones that are pretty significant. I'm not revert to right now, but these ones really don't have me paranoid or like really like lost in it. Like, so we go out to this mall, right? You know what a Spencer's is?
Oh yeah.
So as we're going out, we walk into Spencer's. And the first thing that I see, and I was just in there not too long ago, like really recently, and it wasn't even nearly as heavy satanic themed as it was this particular day. And as I'm standing there just like taking in all this stuff, like shirts, posters, and you name it, man, just about everything in there.
Yeah, I got a lot of dark
shirt racks. Yeah, but this is like really bad. I mean, it seemed like every shirt, everything that was on that display wall was some sort of satanic themed, or like, you know, jokingly about like there was like board games that looked like, you know, 70s type style board games, like let's sacrifice Tommy or something like that, you know, like just kind of mocking it but having fun, like as if though it was like ha.
Well, that's like the last time I went, my daughter was looking at the shirts on the wall, and she was like, I would love to have this shirt right here. And it was some rapper, and it had 999 on the front in red. And I'm like, no, that's 666 upside down. No, that ain't happening.
Right. Yeah, and it's so in our face, right? And as I'm looking around at all this stuff, kind of shaking my head like, wow. Right underneath of me is a shirt rack, and on it is a shirt with the Baphomet on it, a pretty standard image that I'm pretty sure I came across the image of it. But what I'm noticing more on this particular shirt, there's Roman numerals on each side of it. And mind you, like I said, I looked up the Baphomet in 2019 when I had this experience, or beginning of 2020 when that happened. I had looked them up. I never once saw the number 28 associated with them or it, right? And as I'm looking at this shirt, the Roman numerals, and whenever you show this on the screen, it had Roman numerals, I think 15 and 13, which adds up to, so I'm really like struggling to do basic math in my head here. And I'm like, do I really see this in what it's saying? Like, it was like, there's no way that's 28. There's no way, right? And once I'm like finally accepting it, like I really had to bust out my calculator. Like, no, this is what it is, right? Like,
Well, did you ever find out the significance with it? That's what's got me puzzled.
well, here's where I'll say I sit with it as of right now. When I asked for the worldly sign, right? And this is where this stuff can get pretty tricky. Is I don't know if I should venture too much more or wait for it to present itself, because that message and that significance could be a manipulation in itself, when really all I asked for and what God gave me was that worldly sign, right? But for a little while after that, I couldn't accept that, like almost as if though I needed more, in a way that, if God wanted me to know that, well, he obviously gave me the ability to see that far to validate what that thing was, right? Especially in a very profound way, because that wasn't the only thing that I found. So, of course, I look up the Baphomet again right there in the moment. And that year, probably a couple months prior to that, there was a movie that came out called The Baphomet. And right in the title, the description, I got a screenshot of it. The movie immediately starts out with a girl and her family, but the age of the girl, guess how old the girl is? 28 years old. Why would you need to describe the girl's age in a movie description on IMDb? Like, it's in the title or in the description of the movie right there. A 28-year-old woman and her family, yada, yada. That's the premise of this movie. And that obviously stuck out to me, and that comes out well after all this happens. So there's another value, like, wow, like, what is going on here? Like, go from not seeing that number, and maybe other people have. I know I wasn't just lightly looking for these things in these associations. And all of a sudden, in 2021, I find them in front of my face, and then right there on the internet when I look up, in a movie description, right?
Which I didn't know nothing about the correlations with that, but I mean, I've lightly looked into, gematria and things like that, and I know that, the unspeakable name of God, the tetragram is, its value is 26.
Huh. Yeah, I wish and it's kind of been a more relative thing that I've been like kind of taking. Like, if you watch that movie that just came out on Netflix, that'll Leave the World Behind.
No, I haven't seen that.
Oh, it's littered with, inverted truth and predictive programming. And funny enough, I mean, it's a doomsday movie with, the Obamas being executive producers on it, which, yeah, when you watch it, you're just going to be floored by like how this stuff is so in everybody's face, but yet you still have people deny, you know. And it's not really the theme of the movie that bothered me so much. It was some of the dialogue between the characters and some of the things that they would say to each other, like little things that really stuck out to me the most. And just kind of the way this world's being manipulated by the means that it is. And it's like I saw my friend earlier, when it comes to such things like, we really find ourselves in these predicaments of like really assuming somebody who's deceiving others as being like deliberate, man. It's like, nah, man, there's a difference. There's the deceived and then there's a deceiver. And not very many people are deceivers. You know what I mean? They're just saying what they're deceived by.
Yeah, just parroting what they've been told.
Right. So I'm not one to be quick when it comes to like, you know, something of this movie. Like, this movie's of a deceiver. Yep.
Well, Nick, I appreciate you coming on, man, and talking to us, telling us, you know, sharing with us your testimony and your struggles and your revelations, and just, you know, just being open and talking with us. I really appreciate that.
I'm glad and I'm grateful that you took the time out to have me on, man. It really made putting the story on there more than worthwhile.
I always enjoy these conversations. I love to talk and love to hear people's stories, because I mean, you got an amazing story.
There's so much more, and I'm hoping to put it all together at some point to where, you know, at least online it can all be. I just haven't figured out what kind of format or how I'd like to go about it. YouTube of some sort, like where it's just piecemealed out, you know, or because I'd like to engage with other people to hear their testimonies on top of it as well. Like that's what I do in everyday life in whatever way I can, whether some people know it or not. Like, and it's been an amazing journey since then for me. And it's had a good fair share of ups and downs and even more supernatural things at play. That, man,
oh yeah, there's a whole other world that's right at the tip of our nose and our fingertips. It's just, I think once we bit into that apple, a veil's put over our eyes, and there's a whole other realm we can't see anymore.
And some of that's being lifted as we speak in the times that we're in and going into. And the thing that perturbs me the most is the amount of people that don't see some of it. And I really feel like, man, do they even know, you know, what's coming, what's happening? Like,
yeah, a lot of them too. It's just it's a 50-50 split. Some's been told about it and they've just refused, and others just flat out don't want to know.
That's kind of the point of revelation, I suppose, right? It's a step session of, you know, bringing people, those that are of, you know, that delusion of sort, to having their chance, to having it unlocked. Because I don't know how much crazier it has to get than, you know, having creatures the way that they describe plague upon the earth. Like,
when you get into Revelation, it talks about, you know, these beasts coming out of the oceans, you know, and images being given life and speaking fire and just, you know, all this stuff. And when you read, there's even people that when these plagues and all these things happen, curse the heavens.
Right.
So some people are just what's the word I'm looking for? They are just dead set on destruction and damnation.
And I don't even think they really realize to what degree that is, too. Like, that's like, you ever meet someone that really thinks they're of a Satanist mindset or whatever? Like, there's a stalker mom that, I have a really dark soul because they wear dark eyeliner. Maybe they got into Marilyn Manson. It's like, man, if you really knew what was behind all that stuff and how real that is, I don't think you'd make that claim. You know what I mean? Because they're not that type of a person. They're not really that dark person, right? They have that Spencer's, outlook.
Yeah, they're just flirting or dipping their toes in the water. They don't know how deep it is and that there's a big shark about to bite their leg off.
Yep. Leviathan is real.
See, I told you guys that I was going to deliver. And that's why I apologized up front. I know you guys are used to a lot better quality than that from me, and I was just letting you know up front. Apologies. But as you can tell, the sound of this recording is much better, because this is after I've edited it. I got my soundproofing up and I've dialed in my studio a little bit better, so the sound is a lot better and a lot clearer. And I also had bought a new camera and I was playing with it, and I think I was getting some feedback with that, so apologize once again. But man, what a story. And Nick, we just had some really great conversations, and he's had plenty more experiences that he's willing to share with us, so I look forward to those conversations. So Nick, if you're listening to this, thanks once again. Definitely appreciate the time and you sitting down and being open with us and sharing. If you guys have a story, shoot me an email. Head over to the website, PrometheusLensPodcast.com, and maybe we can have a conversation too. Whether it's supernatural experiences, some research and some findings that you found, interesting topics. I'm here for some good conversations. Until next time, torch is high.